Next we will start with 2D transformations. So 2D transformations allow elements to be transformed in 2D space. So using 2D transformations, you can move, rotate, scale or skew elements. So using 2D transformation does not have any effects on elements around the element where you have added 2D transformations. But because of those transformations, the element can overlap on the elements surrounding it. When we use 2D transformations, what we basically do is we manipulate coordinate system used by that particular element. So what happens in case of 2D transformation is when we say rotate, so if this is a HTML element that you have div in this particular shape, so when you rotate it will become something like this. Okay, when we skew it will become from this particular shape to something like this. So this is nothing but skewing. And when we scale, so we are talking about decreasing size of that element or increasing. Okay, so scaling was basically we are either scaling down or we are scaling up. And when we say move, so move is nothing but moving that element across x and y axis like this. So maybe it can be shifted to a new location like this. So this is something that happens when we apply CSS properties related to 2D transformations. So there are a few functions related to 2D transformations. The first one is translate. So what translate does is it moves element along the x and y axis. So inside of bracket you specify values x and y, and this is the function. So what we write is the property rule transform, and then we specify this function. So in this particular, what is going to happen is this particular image, or to the image where these rules will be applied, those all images will be translated with 200 pixels on the x-axis and 50 pixels on the y-axis. So this is one div where we have this particular element attached, and we also have a background image to this div. So with the transformation, what is happening is the element translated from a certain location. Let's say this is the original location. Okay, so the image will be initially displayed like this, and if this is your original location, then we are shifting that image 50 pixels on y-axis. So this becomes your 50 pixel, and from x-axis you are shifting image by 200 pixels. Okay, so this becomes the new position or new point for this image. Okay, so this is how the translation will happen. So this particular point is nothing but 200 comma 50 pixels relative to the starting point that was here. So this was about translate, and we have translateX and translateY. So we just specify single value, and with translateX the image will be moved from x-axis only. You can have these values as negative as well. So this would be some effect. So if this was your original location and you are shifting the image by 200 pixels on x-axis. Similarly, we have translateY, which will move your image along the y-axis. So if this was the original space, then the image is shifted on y-axis from the top with 50 pixels. Then we will talk about rotate. If you want to rotate elements along with its original by a specified angle, then you can use a rotate function, and in the parenthesis you can use 45 degree or any value in unit degree. So this will rotate your image by 45 degrees. So this was the origin of this image, and the image has got rotated by 45 degrees. We can also have these values in minus 45 degree and something like that. So minus 90 degree or minus 10 degree, this is something that you can write over here. So next we will talk about scaling. So what scaling does is it increases or decreases size of the given element. So what we need to do is use the scale function. So inside of scale function you can specify the size. So here is an example. So what we are specifying over here is we want to scale the original image by 1.5 times. That is, we are going to increase it by 50%. I'm also specifying opacity as 0.6 just to explain how it will look, because we are increasing its size. So I have purposely made it a little transparent so that you can see the image behind as well. Okay, similarly you can scale down the image by writing something like this, let's say 0.5. Okay, so of course this is not really necessary, but you can use scale property independently and just specify the size by which you want to scale the original HTML element. So next we have is scaleX, and it will help you scaling your image on the x-axis. So you can just specify this single value and the scaling will be done along the x-axis. So I have specified here the size as 1.5, and this is how the scaling will be done. Similar to scaleX, we have scaleY, and it will help you scaling the image along the y-axis. So something like this. Then we have skew, and it skews element along x and y axis by specified angle. So this is the function and these are the angle values for both x and y axis. Again, this can be in plus or minus. So here what I'm specifying is on x axis I'm going to skew the image by minus 45 degree, and along the y axis I'm going to skew the image with 10 degrees. So this is what exactly is going to happen. So with these multiple options or the multiple inputs to x and y axis, your output will be something like this. Then we have skewX and skewY. So if you just want to skew your image along the x-axis, so you can make use of this particular function. So here is the example, and we have skewY as well. So to which when you specify value, the image will be skewed along the y-axis. So something like this. So this is the skewed image. Okay, and at the bottom this is the original image. Okay, I think you're not able to visualize it properly, but with the help of one example you can understand it correctly. So anyways, we'll take examples on this in the live coding session so you can understand this easily. Now we will see how we can perform multiple transformation at the same time. So this can be achieved by just specifying multiple transform functions just next to one another. So this is the first translate function, then we have rotate, scale and skew. So all transformations we are using in the same transformation value. So here is the output for this particular code. Now we will continue with the 3D transformations. So 3D transformations allows elements to be transformed in a 3D space. So again, similar to 2D transformations, you can move, rotate, scale and skew elements. It won't have any effects on surrounding elements, but definitely depending on your code, your element might overlap on other elements. And just like 2D transformation, in case of 3D transformations also, we manipulate coordinate system, and that is how the elements get transformed. So what we do here is we make use of perspective function where we specify the length, and using this we create new perspective or new perspective view for the 3D transformed element. As the value increases, element will appear further away from the user. That is how it will give you illusion of the depth. So let us see the transformation functions. So we'll start with the translate 3D. So if you just notice in the original 2D transformation, we had translate function. Here we have translate 3D. So it moves your element along X, Y, and Z axis. So we know that this is our axes, and this will be a new axis that is being added for the 3D effect, that is the Z axis, and these are your original X and Y axes. So to the transform 3D function, you specify these three values. So this is our code, and if you notice, I have specified three values over here, and this is the output. So this was the original place for the image, and it has come out a little now. So it has moved along these three axes. Okay, again these values can be in minus also. So we have translateX functions which can be used here. Now it is not technically a 3D translation, it's a 2D transformation only. So if you just notice that it is just getting translated along the x-axis using translateX function. Then similarly we have translateY, wherein it will be translated along the y-axis. Then we have translateZ function, so it moves the element along the z-axis. So if you just notice here, I have specified value as -50, so that is why it is giving us illusion as it has moved back to a certain layer. If you just specify value as 50x, it would have shown something like this. It could have come a little bit nearer to the user, or on the upper layers like this. So the translation really depends on what values you specify to it. Next, we are going to talk about the rotate 3D function. So it rotates elements in 3D space by the specified angle for values x, y, and z. So we have the function as rotate 3D, and these are values for x, y, and z, and this is the degree angle, by how much degree you want to rotate the HTML element. Okay, so if you notice here, for x, y, and z, I have specified these values, but I have just specified value of x as 1 and other are 0. So the image will be rotated along the x-axis only. Okay, and that is also by 45 degree. That is the fourth parameter that we have specified over here. You can simply write rotate x as well and specify the degree. So your image will rotate along the x-axis. So with rotate y, what is going to happen is the image will be rotated along the y-axis with the help of the parameter that we are going to send, that is the 50 degree. You must have noticed that the function is almost similar to the 2D transformations. So the difference between 2D and 3D transformation is of perspectives. So what perspective is doing here is, it is giving us the illusion of image which has got rotated into a 3D or a 3-dimension image. So this is important point to note over here. Then we have rotateZ, and it will rotate the image along the Z axis. You can play around with these values when you change the perspective. So for the lower values, the image will be more closer to the user's perspective, and with the higher values it will go below or the farther away from the perspective. Then in the scale 3D, we have three parameters. It will scale the image along all these three axes. So values we are specifying like this. These are values for all three axes. But this doesn't work independently. This must be used in the combination of rotate and perspective function. So this is how we have specified rotate 3D over here, and values for all three axes and the degree. So this is how scaling will be done. Notice that we are just going to rotate it along the y-axis. That is why it is having an effect like this. Okay, So this is how the scaling can be done in 3D. And then we have scaleX, which scales element along the x-axis. We have almost seen it in the 2D transformations, but here we have also applied the rotate 3D functions, and this is how the effect will be. Similar to this, we have scaleY. Everything is similar. We have just changed the parameter and the function name, and it has given us this effect. Then we have scaleZ, and again the function name and the parameters are changed, and it will give us this particular effect. Now let us check how we can perform more than one transformation. So what we can do is you can write individual transformation and list them in order. So to the transformations property, we are specifying these three different transformations, and obviously we'll have some result like this. So that was all for 2D and 3D transformation. Now let us check few examples in the coding session. So we will try to modify a few values and you will get to know how this is working exactly. So next we'll see about the transitions. So transitions basically allows us to animate the HTML element from its old value to its new value, and it happens smoothly over time. So the properties for the animations are transition, transition delay, transition property, then transition duration, and transition timing functions. So we will see each one of this one by one. So first is the transition property. So transition property specifies name of the CSS properties to which the transition effect is going to get applied. So typical values are border, background, etc. Then we have transition duration, which specifies number of seconds or number of milliseconds that is required for the transition operation to get completed. And then we have transition delay, wherein we specify the initial time that it will take to start the transition. So it is sort of a delay. Once that delay in seconds or milliseconds completes, then only the transition will start. Then we have transition timing function. So this specifies how CSS properties will be affected by the transition. And possible values are cubic bezier. So cubic bezier is a function. So we will see this in detail when we do the coding session. And these are a few keywords. These are basically transition effects. We can say that, the transition will be performed in this manner. Then this is one example of the transitions. So here we are going to use individual properties first that we have seen in the previous slides. So to a button I am applying all these properties: color, border, padding, also background. And then we have this transition properties, where transition property I have set is the background. Then transition duration is 2 seconds, transition delay is 1 second, and the transition timing function is ease in. And on the hover, I'm just setting background as a different color. Shorthand method for this similar transition can be using the transaction property. You can just specify all the values over here like this. So this is your transition property, then this is your transition duration, this is the transition timing function, and this is the transition delay. So I think this is something that you will quickly understand on the coding session that we'll just have after next few slides. So this is the test button and it will be transited into this particular board, but this will have a smooth transition effect. Then we will talk about the animations. So animations allows you to specify changes in CSS properties. This also happens over time as a set of keyframes. Creating animation is a two-step process. We define the individual keyframes first and naming an animation with the keyframe declaration. And the second step is the referencing of keyframe by the name using animation name property. So let us break down this. So animation name is basically keyframes that we define as part of the animations. Animation duration, simple to understand, it is duration of the animation in seconds or milliseconds. Then we have the animation timing function, similar to transition timing function that we have seen earlier. This specifies that how animation will progress over each cycle. Then we have animation iteration count, that is the number of times you want to repeat this animation. Then you also have animation direction, whether the animation specified in the timing function will be play in the normal order or in the reverse order. Then we have animation field mode. So with the animation field mode, it specifies how CSS animation should be applied, the styles to the target before and after the execution. So there are a few more properties that we need to see. One is the animation play state. So this basically tells you whether the animation is running or paused. Then we have add keyframes. So these are nothing but values of animating properties at the various points during the animations. And this is the animation property, which is the shorthand property that can be used to specify all the properties in single declaration. So let us try to quickly take one example with the both method. One is by specifying each property and other one is by using the shorthand method. So in the example, you can see we have this class, and to this we have specified these certain properties, okay, and then we have properties related to animation. So here we are specifying animation name as move, and then animation duration is 4 seconds, and then animation timing function is ease out. Then animation delay is 1 second, that is after 1 second delay the animation will start. Then animation iteration count is 2, so this animation will happen for 2 times. And animation mode is forwards, okay, and the animation direction is alternate. So alternate is basically that it will go in the normal mode first, and in the second iteration it will be in the reverse direction. And then in the keyframes we are specifying that the animation will start from and to. So in the from tab we have left equal to 0, and in the to, that is the ending animation slide or keyframe, we have left as 60%. So what is going to happen for this particular animation? Suppose this is one page and your object where this particular class will be applied, this will be the starting position of that object where left is 0, and then for the first animation it will start moving towards the 60% of the page, okay, so something like this somewhere here maybe, and this will be left 60%. So this will complete one animation. This will be animated for 4 seconds, and then once the first part is complete it will be repeated, and from this location it will animate back to its original position, okay. The reason is we have written animation direction as alternate, okay, and this can be written simply in one line. So this is the animation property. We are specifying that animation name is move, 4 seconds is the animation duration, and then we have ease out as the animation timing function, and 1 second is the delay, 2 is for iteration count, forwards is the animation fill mode, and alternate is the animation direction. And again we have specified the keyframes separately. So you can see that in keyframes we have specified the animation name move, and these are the keyframes for the animation name move. So let us try to see this on the live code, so you understand this, how exactly this code is going to behave in the browser, okay. We'll also talk about animation timing function. Alright, so for examples on 2D, 3D transformations, transitions and animations, you can find this folder in the examples, and in this example we have this image, one CSS and one HTML file. I have kept these files open over here. Also the HTML file is open in the browser. So as we can see in the HTML code, I have referenced the CSS file using the link tag. And then in the HTML we don't have anything serious over here. We just have these divs inside which we have one image, and to all these divs we have specified the classes. And also to images, we have specified few classes and the source tags, which are just pointing to the image. So this is something that is repeated everywhere. Okay, so what is changing is the class names and nothing else. Okay, so throughout the code it is same thing. Only at the bottom you can see that for transitions we have a code that we have seen in the slides, and for the animations we have one div. Okay, so this is the button that we will be requiring for the transition effect, and this is something that we will be requiring for the animations. So let us go to CSS files. So in these CSS files you can notice that this is one parent div that we were having. So it has a fixed margin of 50 pixels from all sides, and width and height is specified as 120 pixels. And then we have the background wherein the URL is specified, so the image will be part of the background of the div element. Okay, and it is no repeat, so it won't be repeating itself. Now we have these classes that we have applied to the image tag. Okay, and these are basically going to transform the div from its normal flat 2D mode to the 2D and 3D transformations. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open the browser window in full screen mode, and I'm going to open the inspect tab, so we can quickly explain and change values from here to understand. So this is the original state of the image. Okay, and if we notice here, so we have added the transformation function, so it is just going to translate its location by 200 pixels from x-axis and 50 pixels from the y-axis. Okay, so if you see here, when I am changing the values accordingly, it is changing its position. Okay, so like this. And if I just disable this property, you can see that it is changing its location. Okay, it is just going behind this particular image. Okay, so I'm just going to re-enable this one. Okay, for this particular next example, we are just going to transform the image along the x-axis. For that we are going to use translate function. So we have just specified 200 as a value over here. You can see that we can increase or decrease this value. So it has just translated on the x-axis. Similarly, we have the translate y function. So there you can see the transform property has this value translate y, and we can specify the value in pixels. Okay, like this. Then we have a rotate function. So for that we are going to use the rotate function, and then inside it we can specify values in degrees. So you can see that the image is rotating properly. Okay, the values can be in minus also. So let me just try to go there quickly. Let's say I'm writing -10 like this. Yeah, then we have the scale function. So to the scale functions, what we have done is we have set the opacity as well. So if you remove this, you can see that the image which is just below the transformed image will not be visible. So that is why we just purposely added the opacity over here. And the function that we have used for scaling is the scale function. So we have scaled it by 1.5 times. Okay, so if I just write 1, so you will not see any effect of the actual scaling. But when I increase it, let's say 2, so you can see that it has increased by 2 times. It has almost doubled it. Then you can have the scale functions along the x-axis using scaleX. Okay, similarly you can have scaling done on the y-axis using scaleY, like this. Then we will talk about the skew function. So what skew is going to do is it is going to skew your image along the x-axis. So skewX is the function for skewing your image on the x-axis. So again you can write it in degrees like this. So you can see change in the values. Similarly we have skewY. So again it takes input as degrees. So I have added 10 degrees over here. You can see the changes in the image. We can also talk about the skew function, which basically takes two values, x and y. So image gets skewed along the x and y axis at the same time. So if I just make it 0, you can see that these x axis skew and this particular image is almost the same. Similarly, if I undo this change and make this one as 0, so this one and this one is same now. Okay, and you can use the combination of both this. So it was minus 45 degrees. Okay, so this is how it is going to be. Then we have this matrix as well. So if you see over here, we can write transformation matrix. So this is nothing but the combination of multiple transformations. Okay, so we are talking about adding multiple transformations. So this is fairly complex property value to understand, but as I said, this is just the combination of multiple transformation properties. You can see that the skewing is getting applied over here. If I change this, you can see that the scaling is getting done, and here you can see that this is basically the translate function. These are the values for the translate, and this would be your translation across y-axis like this, and this is again, this is for skewing, and so this is again for scaling along the x-axis. So I think this function is quite complex to use, but in case you're confident about using it, you can definitely use it. So matrix is a function wherein you can apply these multiple transformation properties at the same time. And then we have one more method wherein you can specify this transform function, and here actually you can write this multiple values like this. So I am translating, then I'm rotating the image, plus I'm going to scale it, plus I'm going to skew the image. So this is how you can apply these multiple functions at the same time. Okay, now we have completed 2D transformations. We'll talk about the 3D transformations now. So in 3D transformations, it will be done along the three axes x, y, and z. So you can see that when I translate 3D, three values are specified over here. So when I change this value, you can see that the movement is along the x-axis. So the translation will be done on the x-axis. The second one would be the y-axis. So it will move vertically top and bottom, and then when I say Z, you can see that the image is trying to zoom or zoom out. Okay, so this is how the translation will be done using the transformation function and the function translate 3D. So this is very fairly simple to understand. So translate x, y, z, these are three functions, so it will just translate your image along those particular axes. So this is the translate z. So again, you can see that you can zoom in or zoom out. Okay, you can I think see the effect over here. Similar, this one is for translate y, so this will move top and bottom, and this one will move left and right, okay, depending on the value. Then we have rotate 3D. So in rotate 3D, we have three values for the x, y, and z axis, plus we have the rotation angle. Okay, so if I change, you can see that the rotation angle of the image is changing. Okay, and plus if I change value, so you can see that the image is trying to rotate differently now. Okay, so this is the y-axis, so it will just rotate along the y-axis with other values of x and z, and of course the rotation angle. Okay, so this is how the images can be rotated using rotate 3D functions. Then similar to translation, we have rotate x, rotate y, and rotate z. So only difference here is that we have function rotateX, so which basically simply changes rotational angle over the x-axis like this. Okay, so this is completely opposite side of the image. Okay, similarly for rotate y, again you have rotate y function, so you can see that it is changing along the y-axis. And here in case of the rotateZ function, you can see rotation is along the Z axis. So that is how this is rotating. Then we will talk about the scaling function in 3D. So this is the object. So we have used scale 3D function over here. So we are specifying all the three values for axes. So X, Y, and Z are the values for scaling. And then we are required to use rotate 3D function here. That is only when it will work. So if you see, when I change the values, scaling is getting done along those x-axis. So when I'm increasing value across all the axes, you can see that there's a slight increase in terms of scaling. And of course we are required to use rotate function also here. Okay. Then again we have the scaling along the x, y, and z axis individually. You can use the scale x, y, and z function. So again, this is something that easy to understand. Okay. We have this rotate 3D function over here again. The same is being used for scale Y and scale Z. Okay. You can see here. So this values you can change and see how scaling is getting done along the Z axis only. Then finally we'll see the one particular example wherein we have all the 3D transformations done in the single program. So these are different properties, and we are just space separated these values, and those are working really well over here. Finally, we will talk about the transitions and animations, but because we have loaded this page a while ago, so I will just quickly reload this page. Okay, and you can notice the transition and the animation that is happening over here. Okay, so the transition has got completed plus the animation just completed now. So I'll just refresh the page. Just notice on the transition part. Okay, so you can see that this was the original state of the image and it has got changed to a red color, and also you can see the animation at the bottom has got completed. So let us see what CSS code is over here. So if you see that there is a set of transition functions that I've added. So I have added the transition property as background, and transition duration is 2 seconds. I can increase or decrease this transition duration. And we talked about this transition timing function. So this is a little important. So these are the predefined keywords or transition effects that we can say. So these are a few predefined values. So once we change this, there would be a significant difference in terms of these animations. So if the current animation is like this, it is just easing in. Okay. So what I will do is I'll just change this to, let's say, ease out or something like that. So ease out is already here. So let me just try here as well. Okay, so there would be a slight difference in terms of how it is getting loaded. Yeah, but maybe in this particular case the difference is not very visible. Let me just try to changing something else. Let's say I'm adding step end maybe. So step end. Okay, and when I hit refresh, yeah, so you can see that the transition style has got changed. So it animated, but it just showed the basic difference of how the transition will be done. So we will quickly talk about the other properties, and then I want to spend some more time on the timing function or the transition timing function. So we have the transition delay over here. So you can notice that it is 1 second. So once the page loads, after 1 second it is starting. Okay, so 1 second has elapsed, and this button has got animated now. So let us talk about the animation property now. Then in the animation property we specify the name, that is move over here in this case. Then we have transition duration as 2s. Then we have the animation timing function as ease out, and animation delay is 1, just like the test button. and we are going to, let's say, increase the count of this to 3, and let's say animation duration as 2 seconds. Okay, let me just do these changes over here in the code itself. So I'm going to increase the animation duration and increase the repetition count. Okay, when I hit refresh, you can see that after a second it has started animating. So this was second, this is the third animation, and this is the fourth, and it will stop now. So we will talk about the easing functions. Okay, so in easing you can customize how you want this animation to get completed. Okay, and at the bottom you can see this is how the animation is going to perform depending on how we draw the cubic bezier. Okay, so like this. So you can just play around this and see how the animation is going to perform. Okay, so in some cases like this you can see that the animation is coming back and going forth. So let me just copy this part. Okay, and so you can see that when I'm doing clicking on this particular icon and selecting these values, I get this area, and I can change the values related to cubic bezier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste here instead of easeout function. Okay, and hit refresh. So you can notice the difference between how the animation is running now. Okay, so you can have your custom animations, and cubic beziers are great help in terms of creating those custom animations. So that was all for animations. I think what you can do is you can play around with these examples, try changing few values, and get a good grip on animations, because CSS animation is really easy to use, and it really makes your page very interactive and very intuitive. So it's always good that we add some sort of animations wherever required on your web pages. So the next we have multi-column layout, and this is quite useful, especially when we want to develop responsive websites. And what multi-column layout does is it creates multiple columns across the y-axis, and these columns can generally be made floating and hence responsive. So these boxes basically get aligned to one another in a sequence, forming vertical sections. So the property related to multi-column layout is the column count. So it specifies how many columns that will be appearing on the screen. So like this, you can specify the number of columns. So here we have specified 2. So this is something that will be displayed on the screen. So it has created these 2 columns like this. Okay, so this is one box, this is the other box. Then we can also specify column width. So it basically sets the desired column width for each column. So you can specify column width like this, and then you can specify values in px or percentage. So again, this is the output. These are 2 columns with the width 300 pixels. Then we have column gap. So this controls gap between 2 columns. So you can specify the number of columns, and you can also specify the column gap. So here I have specified 50 pixels as the column gap. So once these columns are rendered, 50 pixel gap will be maintained across this column. So this would be 50 pixels. Then we'll talk about the column rule. So this basically adds lines between columns with width, style, and color. So you can specify the property like this, column rule, and then we have specified 2px as the width of the line, and solid will be the mode, and this is the color for that particular line. So this is how it will look. In case you had multiple columns, let's say 3, then another line could have drawn here, and then the third column could have continued. Then we have column field. So using column field, we specify how the column length in the multi-column element are affected by the content flow. So property values for this particular property are balance, auto, initial, and inherit. We know what inherit and initial is. So auto is something that the rendering engine will take a decision on itself, and automatically it will try to set the values. And the balance is it will try to balance the field, and it is the default value as well. So you can see that depending on the available width, it will try to fill up the columns. Then we'll talk about quickly box sizing. So in box sizing, the CSS box model basically adds padding or border outside the content area, which affects elements width and height. However, the box sizing property alters CSS box model, and any padding or borders specified on the element is laid out and drawn inside the content area. So with this, what happens is the rendered width and height of the element is same as the specified CSS width and height. So there are two properties related to box sizing. One is border size and other one is the content box. So let us see and try to understand this with the help of one example. So this is one example. You can notice that I have specified box sizing as the content box. So this is the default value, and this is going to be default behavior. It basically adds padding and border in the elements width, making element wider. So if this is your box, okay, and you want to add padding or border, so it will be added outside the core box, core CSS box, like this. But on the other hand, if you write the box sizing as border box, in that case what is going to happen is the padding and border will not be increased outside of the box, but it will be absorbed inside of the box. Okay, so this makes a notable difference because this is going to be the outermost edge for the CSS box, and in case we are going to add the padding or border, then it will be considered inside the border box. Then we will talk about the flexible box layout, another extremely important topic of CSS3. And in flexible box layout, we have flexbox as the property, which basically creates a flexible user interface with rows and columns without percentage and fixed length values. So we don't require to explicitly set these values, so it can automatically adapt those values. So what we have is one container. Okay, so there is one outer div, and inside this outer div we have two divs. Okay, so we are specifying this outer as the display flex, and it will help me creating the flexible box inside it. And inside this div we have another two divs, okay, like this. So to the both divs this property will be applied. Notice that we are writing flex1 over here, plus to one of the other div we have additionally specified the class name light, and we are just changing background over there. And we can see that to the most of the divs flex1 property has got applied. The container, outside container, has display type as flex, and it has created these three flexible box. Just to this div, just because we have added the div dot light or the light as the class, so it has displayed the background color in the different color. So this is how the flexbox works, but let us dwell on more properties. So we'll talk about the flex direction, which controls flow of flex items inside the flex container. So default value is row, and these are all the probable values: row, row reverse, column, and column reverse. So this is how we write this property: flex direction, row reverse, and row or column and column reverse. So what this basically does is it changes the position of the children which are inside this particular element. So when we say that those needs to be displayed row wise, the direction will be set using this particular value, and in case you want the flex direction to be column wise, you can set this value, and row reverse and column reverse is the opposite of it. So you can see in this example we have specified a row reverse. So ideally the row would have been item 1 would have been the first item and item 2 would have been the second item, but because we have written a row reverse over here, so the second item is appearing first in the flex container, and the first item, which was item 1, it is being displayed as the second item. Then we have flexible box layout. So in this we basically alter width or height to fill the available space, and that can be done using flex property to the child elements. So you can notice that I have specified 1 and 2 over here. So you can increase these values by 3, 4, 5 and so on. And you can see that just because I have written 1 over here, so it has a lower width than the second item, which has a higher width because of this 2 value. So there are scenarios where we are required to align the flex items. So we can make use of these properties. So first 3 properties are related to flex container, and the fourth property is related to flex item. So let us see all these 4 properties one by one. So we have justify content first. So it helps align items in horizontal direction of the content. So possible values for these properties are flex start, flex end, center, space between and space around. So when I say flex start, so in the flex container it will start from this location, so it will work like this. And when I specify flex start, so all the boxes will be displayed in the end, something like this. So this will be the output in case we are writing flex start, and this will be the output when we write flex end. So of course when we write center, it will be center aligned, and when we write space between, so space will be added in between the flex items. And when we say space around, so in that case the space will be added around the flex items. So something that would be easy to understand when we do the practicals on this. So here is the general syntax and one example on the justify content. So what we have over here is CSS related to the container flex, and we have specified width and minimum height over here, also margin and font size. Important property that we have set over here is the display flex, and then we have added border, and then the justify content where I have specified the space around as the value. Then for the sub items of your container flex or your flex items, I have specified padding as 10 pixel, background and width. And then we have one more CSS to one individual element. We have applied a class called as light, and we have set a different background color to it. So here you can see that it has added space around the all flex items. Okay, so this is justify content with the value space around. We have couple of other values that we have seen in the previous slide, so that is something that I will explain you in the live coding sessions. So you will get an idea how exactly these values will make change in the flex layout. So the next one is align items. So in align items, it aligns items in perpendicular direction of the container. So we can specify these values again: flex start, flex end, center, baseline and stretch. So this is one example where we have specified the center as the value. So you can see that the items have got aligned center in the container box. So similarly, when we write the other properties flex start, so it will align those items in the start of the container. Flex end will align those items to the end of the container. What stretch is going to do, it is going to stretch the height of all the align items, and it will stretch all the flex items and try to occupy complete height of the flex container. And in case of baseline, the flex items are aligned to the baseline of the container. So here is one example, and we can see that we have specified the align items as center, and that is why the flex items are aligned to the center. So next we will see align self. It specifies the alignment for the selected element inside the flexible container. So this can be applied to individual flex items, and that is how they can get arranged in the required format. So in case you have, let's say, 3 different flex items, and you can have those aligns at the flex start, okay, and then you can have one individual flex item which will be maybe centrally aligned. So in this case it is going to self aligned. There could be scenarios where this kind of cases would be required, and when you can make use of the align self property. Then we will talk about the example on align self. So what we have done is we have specified align self to the flex end, so that is why all the flex items are got aligned at the bottom. Then we have align content. It helps to align flex containers line within it when there is an extra space in the cross axis. It takes values same as justify content but applies them to cross axis rather than the main axis. It accepts one more value, that is the stretch. So let us take one example on align content. So what we have done is created one class for flex container, added width, minimum height, margin, font size, display, and so on. So display is flex, if you notice. We have also added border, and then we have added flex wrap as wrap because that is something we will need to align the content with a certain value. So here we have specified value as space around, and then we have the properties set for the all flex elements or the flex items. So we have specified height and width as 100 and a certain background color which is red. And then we have added one additional class which will be applied to one of the flex items, and it has a different color. So here is the output. Then next we have the order. Using this we can change order of the flex items. It accepts positive and negative values. The default value is 0. So here is one example. We have 3 items in the CSS. So these are 3 different flex items. So we have specified order for these items using numbers. One number is -1, this is 0, and this is 1. So this would be the first item that will be displayed, this would be the second, and this would be the third item. So you can see in the output number 3 has got displayed first, then the number 2, and then the number 1. So this is typically useful in case you want to shift the columns. So you can just change the orders, and the columns will get shifted automatically. Then we have flex wrap. So it wraps flex items into multiple lines if there is no space in the flex line. And possible values for flex wrap is wrap, no wrap, and wrap reverse. So we will see the example of wrap reverse. So this is something the output would be. So you can see that though our sequence is like 1 2 3 4 5 6, you can see that the entire row has got printed in the reverse order. If we had wrap as the option, so output would have been item 1, item 2, item 3, and then at the bottom item 4, item 5, and item 6. So flex wrap is also important in case you want to change the place, or how the box layout is going to be. Then finally we have horizontal and vertical center. So there what we require is the main container, and we just specify that it's a flex container. And then in the child box what we do is we specify margin auto and text align center. So what it is going to do is it is going to align the text from bottom and top and left and right. okay, and it will be perfectly equispaced. So let us try to understand these concepts using the live coding session. So let us open our examples and I'll explain those examples to you. Alright, so let us start with the examples on multi-column layouts, box sizing and flexbox. So you can find this particular folder in the examples, and in this specific folder we have these three files. One is CSS file and other two are HTML files. So the small flex sample is one file that I have created just as a very small example for the flex sample. So this is something that we'll check later on, but let us start with these two files first. So in these two files, we have the HTML code where we have the h2 tag along with the p tag, and there is one more for the second column, third column, and so on. So code till this is related to the multi-column structures, and then we have code related to box sizing over here, and at the bottom we have code related to flexbox. So all the CSS classes that we have specified over here are inside the CSS class mentioned here, and this CSS class is linked at the top using link tag. So let me just open the file over here, which is already open here. So in the first example, you can see that we have specified column count as 2, so that is why 2 columns are displayed over here. So we can also increase the number of columns, and you can see the text is getting split into multiple columns. Okay, so these are kind of a virtual columns, but your content is getting split into multiple columns. That is the only thing that is happening over here. Then in the next example, we have added the column gap. So you can see that column gap as 50 pixel is added, and you can identify that particular difference from here. Okay, so you can increase or decrease this gap. So you can see that when I'm increasing, there's a structural change that is happening in the columns. We can also add a rule using the CSS property rule, column hyphen rule, and you can specify the border details over here. So we have specified 2x solid and the color is red, so that is why this particular rule has got added over here. Then in the next example, we have column fill as auto. So what autofill is going to do is it is going to adjust the content automatically based on the height available. And in the next we have box sizing, where we have seen that the padding and border will be either be consumed as the part of the content or it will be outside of the CSS box. So you can briefly notice here that because in the second example we are using border box and not content box, so the content has shrinked a bit and it is using more lines, whereas in the previous example we can see that the content box is outside, hence the height and width is more than the border box. So you can see here the width is 248 by 144, and here the width is more, it's almost 298 pixels by 108 in height. Then the important concept, but before that let me just take this quick example of the small flex box. So this is something, the output that I have created using one other file, that is the small flex sample. So in the small flex sample, what I have done is I have created one div, that is this outermost div, and then I have 3 different boxes inside the main div. So these are my flex items. Okay, and for this example what I have done is display flex is the most common property that I have added for the container, and then I have specified flex direction as row. I can write it as column, and you can see that it will display as columns. Okay, I can also write, let's say, column reverse. So you can notice that initial ordering is 1 2 3, and it will then reverse itself. It has become 3 2 1 now. And similarly we have row reverse, so it will display in row form but it will be in the reverse form. So the third item will become first item and so on. So let me just make it row for now. Okay, and you must have also noticed that it is changing its location. That is happening because of this. Okay, so because we have written flex end, it is coming at the end. We can write flex start and you can notice that it will move to the starting point. All these items are also moving towards bottom of the container. That is because of this particular property, that is align self. These boxes are aligning to themselves using the align self property, and because I have written flex end, those are displayed toward the end. So what I can do is I can just change it to, let's say, start and refresh. So you can see that those have moved to the top, and I can change it to, let's say, center, and they will be center aligned. So you can play around these values. So for now, let us continue with our example. So in the example, we have the flexbox properties added with the help of multiple examples. So you can play around this and continue to see what effects it brings when you change certain values. Before we start, let me quickly take you through the files. So these are the codes related to flexbox starting from this particular point. So we have containers and flex codes. So anyways, we'll see these codes in the inspect box. We also have the HTML where we have created all these elements. Okay, so generally we have created the container flex, and then inside it we have the flex items, and these are more codes. Only the thing that is changing is the class names. So this is something that is till the end. Let us try to understand each one from the HTML page itself. So in the first example, you can see that I have specified width as 80%, and there are a few others important CSS properties. Most important one is the display flex. Okay, so these are the other properties are beautification only. So we have just set the borders, margin, and so on. And for the inside elements, you can see that we have just specified these elements and there is nothing much to it, and it has just created this flex box. And we can set the direction. That is something that we have specified in the next example. So in the container, you can see that I have specified flex direction as row reverse. You can write row and it will set to the default style like this. So you can see that in the item 1 is coming first now and the item 2 is second. Then we have the next example wherein we can see that to the items we have set the flex property, and you can see that it changes its width automatically. So I'm just changing the flex value over here, and you can see that when I say 1, it will just equally split itself with the other particular item. Then we have justify content, and for justify content we have set the value as space around. So that is why the space is getting added around the flex items. Let me just change these values to, let's say, center. So you can see that those are getting centrally aligned. Then we can send it to either ends, like flex end, then flex start. Okay, and then we have space around again, then space between. So only space will be added in between of the flex boxes. So these are few more properties you can just play around and understand. And the next we will check is the alignment of the flex items. So for this we are required to use property align items. So you can see that here this individual item I have aligned in the center. You can see the other items as well. So you can see that this align items is added to the flex container, and you can again change it. When you remove it, is going to consume 100% of the height, and you can also see the center and when it goes to end and so on. You can also use align self, and this can be applied to the individual elements, and those will align themselves. Okay, so you can see that again those are aligning themselves. So this is particularly useful when you have single element that you want to align to a different location. Okay, so this is again a similar example. Okay, you can change the order of your flex items using order as the property rule. So you can see that we have specified certain values to these elements, so those are getting organized, or we can say reorganized depending on the order. So here the order is -1, so that is why it is displayed as the first item, and by default this is the 0, so it is in the middle, and the last item that is displayed over here is technically your first item, but because of this order 1, it is getting displayed in the last. Okay, similarly we have the flex wrap, so we can see that you can specify the wrap property over here. So when I say flex reverse, so you can see that when you have multiple rows, the bottommost is coming at the top, but when I just remove that property, set it to wrap, you can see that the first row is by default coming to the top and the second one at the bottom. And when you say no wrap, you can see that all are trying to fall in line just next to one another. You can also align two divs. So you can have these two elements. One is the parent div like this, and this is the second element inside it. You just specify that text align center, and the child will get aligned in the middle automatically. So you can see in the second div, it is happening because of this margin auto that we have specified. So it is trying to create automated margin, and it basically calculates the margin automatically and applies it. So when I remove it, you can see that it is just trying to display in its default mode, but when I enable the margin, you can see that it is getting perfectly aligned in the center from top and bottom. So that was all for the flexbox. It is very important topic in terms of modern CSS designs, and it is really useful. It really shortens your code a lot when you have multiple column structures, or you want to create responsive columns, and you have some content inside those divs. So this can be easily managed with the help of flexbox.